Most people are one sentence away from changing the entire direction of their financial life. Not one strategy, not one investment, one sentence. A sentence that has existed for over 3,000 years, that has been passed from teacher to student in an unbroken chain across generations, that has been written on the doorposts of certain homes and carried in the pockets of certain families and whispered over the beds of children in households that seemed, to outsiders, to have a relationship with prosperity that could not quite be explained by effort alone. A sentence that most people will never encounter in any personal finance book, in any wealth-building course, in any conversation with any advisor who was trained in the modern tradition of money management. I am going to give you that sentence today, and then I am going to show you exactly what to do with it for 7 days, with a precision that goes far beyond simply reading it, so that what it is designed to produce in the mind actually has the conditions it needs to take root. But before I do, I need you to understand something, not as a disclaimer, as the single most important piece of context you can have before receiving this teaching. The sentence I am going to give you is not powerful because it is ancient. Age alone means nothing. A mistake made 1,000 years ago is still a mistake. What makes this sentence powerful is structural. It is built in a specific way that operates on the mind below the level of conscious thought, in the same layer where your financial beliefs live, where your relationship with money was first formed, where the ceiling you have been pressing against for years was installed without your permission, and has been maintained ever since without your awareness. Reading this sentence casually will produce nothing. Reading it with the method I am about to teach you will produce something that I have watched happen in people across 33 years of teaching this tradition. Something that does not announce itself dramatically, something quiet, a shift in what you notice, a change in what feels possible, and then, following that, a reorganization of what is available to you in the physical world. I have seen this sequence enough times that I no longer wonder whether it works. I only wonder whether the person applying it is ready to stay in it long enough to let it work. My name is Rabbi Naomi. I have spent 33 years living inside the Kabbalistic and Talmudic wisdom traditions, not as a scholar observing from a distance, but as a practitioner inside a lineage of transmission that was given to me directly, teacher to student, in the same way it has been passed for centuries. My grandfather memorized 300 proverbs from the ancient texts and recited a specific one, specific to whatever condition he was navigating, every morning before his feet touched the floor. He did this from the age of 17 until the day he died at 89. He arrived in a new country with no money and no language and built something that sustained 4 generations. When people asked him how, he said the same thing every time. I borrowed my thinking from people wiser than me. That is what I am going to help you do today. Stay with me to the very end of this teaching. I promise you, as I always promise, that what I am giving you near the close, the warning, the thing that happens after you begin this 7-day practice, is the piece that determines whether everything else lands. Without it, you will begin and then stop at precisely the wrong moment. So stay. Every word today connects to every other word. Before we go one step further, I want you to type the words, "I borrow from the wise," in the comments right now, before you continue watching. That phrase is not random. It is the exact posture this practice requires, a willingness to let a mind that is older and quieter than your current anxiety do some of the thinking for you. I borrow from the wise. Write it now. I want to tell you about a woman in her early 40s I will call Shira. She came to a small group teaching I held on a Thursday evening about 2 years ago. She was not in financial crisis. She was clear about that when she introduced herself. She had income. She had stability of a kind. But she described her relationship with money the way some people describe a relationship with a person they have been with for 20 years but never truly trusted. Functional, tense, always slightly braced for something to go wrong. She said, "I have enough, but I live as if I don't. Every financial decision I make from a posture of defense. Every time something good happens with money, I immediately start waiting for the thing that will undo it." She was not describing poverty. She was describing a poverty of inner relationship with money, a chronic low-grade financial fear that was present even when the external circumstances did not justify it. And this, I told her that evening, is actually the more insidious problem. Because it is invisible. Because people around her looked at her stability and assumed she had resolved her relationship with money. She had not. She had only learned to perform resolution while the fear ran quietly underneath everything. I gave Shira the practice I am about to give you. Not immediately. I spent the first hour of that evening teaching exactly what I taught you in the last few minutes, the structural understanding of why words at the level of the ancient proverb operate differently on the mind than modern language does. Then I gave her the sentence and the 7-day method. She came back to the following session 3 weeks later. She did not tell me about a windfall. She did not tell me about a sudden financial breakthrough. She told me that something had changed in the way she experienced money that she could not fully explain. She said, "I stopped bracing. I do not know exactly when it happened, but somewhere in the second week I noticed that I had made 2 financial decisions, one small, one significant, without the background fear that usually accompanies every money decision I make." She said it felt like taking off a piece of clothing she had been wearing so long she had forgotten it was on her. Within 6 weeks of that shift in inner posture, she had pursued an opportunity she had been avoiding for 2 years because of fear, and it had produced what she described as the clearest financial forward movement she had experienced in a decade. I tell you this not as a promise of what will happen to you. I tell you this as an honest account of what I have observed repeatedly when this practice is applied with the precision I am about to teach. Now, the proverb. It comes from the book of Proverbs, Mishlei in the Hebrew, and it is from the 10th chapter. The translation I am going to give you is not the most common English rendering, because the most common English rendering has been softened in ways that strip the structural precision from the original. I am going to give it to you as close to the living Hebrew intention as the English language can carry it. The proverb is this: "The blessing of the eternal makes rich, and painful toil adds nothing to it." Read that again slowly. The blessing of the eternal makes rich, and painful toil adds nothing to it. I need you to sit with this for a moment before I unpack it, because the first reading will almost certainly produce a reaction, an argument, a resistance, a voice that says, "But of course effort matters. Of course work matters. Of course you cannot simply sit and wait for a blessing." And I want to tell you, that voice is not your wisdom. That voice is your conditioning. And the gap between what that voice tells you and what this proverb is actually saying is precisely the gap where most people's financial lives are losing energy every single day. The proverb is not saying effort is irrelevant. The ancient tradition never said that. There is no lineage in this wisdom that teaches passivity. What the proverb is saying, what the Hebrew word esev, which is translated here as painful toil, actually means in its root form, is straining effort, anxious effort, the kind of effort that comes not from alignment and clarity, but from fear of not enough, the kind of working that is driven not by purpose, but by panic. And the proverb is saying, with 3,000-year precision, that specific quality of effort, the strained, the anxious, the grinding effort of someone who does not believe the blessing will come unless they personally force it into existence. That effort adds nothing. It consumes energy. It produces exhaustion. It degrades the quality of every decision made inside it, and it crowds out the very internal condition, the openness, the receptivity, the aligned awareness that allows blessing to actually land. This is not theology, this is psychology. This is a precise observation about the relationship between the inner state of the person and the quality of what enters their life. And it has been confirmed, not in those words, but in every meaningful way, by decades of research on the neuroscience of scarcity mindset, on the cognitive narrowing that chronic financial stress produces, on the measurable difference in decision quality between a mind operating from abundance orientation and a mind operating from fear. The ancient teachers did not have fMRI machines. They had 3,000 years of watching human beings and writing down what they observed with a precision that has not been surpassed. Now let me give you the 7-day method, because the proverb alone, read once, is a beautiful sentence. Read with this method for 7 days, it becomes a practice. And practice is the only thing that actually changes anything. Day 1 is about reception. You read the proverb 3 times in the morning, slowly, at the pace of someone who is listening rather than reciting, not as a mantra, not as a ritual, not as a box to check, as if you are hearing it for the first time and you genuinely do not yet know what it means for your specific life. Read it aloud if you are able. There is something about hearing your own voice carry the words that moves them from the visual processing center of the brain into the auditory and emotional processing centers simultaneously. 3 readings. Morning. Before your phone, before your email, before the day's demands have colonized your attention. Day 2 is about identification. After your 3 morning readings, you take 1 minute, only 1 minute, to ask yourself honestly, where in my financial life am I currently engaged in painful toil? Not effort, toil. The straining, fear-driven, grinding kind. Name it specifically, not generally. Not, I work too hard, that is too vague to be useful. Name the specific behavior, the checking of the account balance 7 times a day out of anxiety rather than information, the taking on of work you do not want because you are afraid to say no, the postponing of a decision because the fear of the wrong outcome has become more powerful than the cost of the delay. Name the specific behavior, write it down. This is the first functional application of the proverb, using it as a diagnostic lens rather than merely a comfort. Day 3 is about replacement. You take the specific behavior you named on day 2 and you ask, what would the non-toiling version of this behavior look like? Not the passive version, the aligned version, the version driven by wisdom rather than fear. If the toiling behavior is checking your balance 7 times a day from anxiety, the aligned version is checking it once, deliberately, with the intention of information rather than reassurance. If the toiling behavior is taking work you do not want because you are afraid, the aligned version is practicing, even once, even in a small way, saying no to one thing that is not aligned and watching what happens in the space that opens. This is not passive, this is precise. The proverb is not instructing you to stop working. It is instructing you to change the inner quality from which the work comes. Day 4 is about deepening. On this day, you read the proverb in the morning as usual, and then you carry it with you, not on paper necessarily, but in active memory. You return to it at least twice during the day, in the middle of moments of financial decision or financial anxiety. Not to recite it mechanically, but to let it function as a reset, a single breath of the wider view in the middle of the narrowed one. The tradition calls this hitbonanut, contemplative dwelling, not thinking about the idea abstractly, but inhabiting it, letting it be present in the room with you while you go about your work. Day 5 is about gratitude. And I want to be precise about what I mean by this because the word gratitude has been diluted almost to meaninglessness in the current cultural conversation. What the tradition means by gratitude at this stage in a practice like this is not a feeling of pleasantness about your circumstances. It is an act of witnessing. On day 5, after your morning reading, you spend 2 minutes naming, in writing specifically, 3 instances in your recent financial history where something arrived that you did not produce through straining effort. Something that came through a conversation you did not force. An opportunity that appeared through alignment rather than grinding. A resolution that happened more easily than the problem suggested it should. These exist in every financial life. The mind trained by scarcity has stopped seeing them. The practice of naming them, specifically in writing on day 5, begins to retrain the seeing. Day 6 is about transmission. On this day, you share the proverb with one person, not as a performance of your new wisdom, but genuinely, as an act of giving something you have found valuable to someone who might need it. This is consistent with the giving principle that runs through this entire tradition. What you freely transmit creates an energetic spaciousness in you that what you hoard contracts. Share it in a conversation, in a message, in any form that is natural to you. And notice carefully, whether the act of giving it away makes it feel more yours or less yours. The tradition already knows the answer. I want you to discover it for yourself. Day 7 is about commitment. On this final day of the first cycle, you make a decision, written, specific, witnessed by yourself, if not by anyone else, about which single change in your financial behavior you are carrying forward from this week. Not a list, one thing. The one behavior most directly connected to the anxious toil the proverb named in you during this 7 days. You write it down, you date it, and you commit to it not as a resolution made from inspiration, but as a practice made from understanding. Because understanding does not evaporate the way inspiration does. Inspiration feels good in the moment and fades by the following Tuesday. Understanding is structural. It changes the way you see, and the way you see determines everything that follows. Now I need to give you the warning, because the practice will be tested, and without this you will misread the test as failure. Somewhere in days 3 through 5, not always, but often, a period of financial friction will arise, something slightly uncomfortable, a delay, a tightening, an unexpected cost. And the voice that lives in your conditioned financial fear will say immediately, "See, you have been sitting reading old proverbs while real problems accumulate. This is foolish. Go back to what you know." I am telling you now, before it arrives, this is not evidence that the practice is not working. This is the specific, predictable resistance of a pattern that is being loosened for the first time. The toiling mind does not give up its territory without one final argument for its own necessity. It will create circumstances that seem to prove it was right to be afraid all along. This is the test. You stay. You name it out loud if you need to. Say, "I was told about this. I know what this is. I am not stopping." And you complete the 7 days. If you want the full library, 12 proverbs from this tradition, each paired with a specific financial condition, each with its own method of daily application, and the teaching on how to build a rotating 7-day practice that addresses different layers of your money psychology across a full month, it is in the resource in the description below. This is the work of a practitioner, not a content creator. It is there for the person who is genuinely ready to apply it. If you finish this video, you may be that person. I want to know something from you. Tell me in the comments, which word in the proverb landed hardest for you? Blessing, rich, toil, or nothing? Just that one word and one sentence about why. What you name tells me more about where your financial psychology actually lives than any questionnaire could. I read every comment. Write it below. If this channel is where you come for the kind of wisdom that does not talk down to you, does not simplify what deserves complexity, and does not mistake inspiration for transformation, subscribe now. What is coming in the weeks ahead is some of the deepest practical material I have released in this format. Subscribe so you are here when it arrives. And if this teaching gave you something you did not have when you sat down, a new question, a different lens, a sentence that is going to stay with you, press the like button. Not for me, for the person scrolling right now who has been trying everything and whose exhaustion is real and whose effort is genuine and who needs to hear from something older than this week's advice that the quality of the inner condition is the variable that changes everything. Your press of that button might put this in front of them today. Do it now. You came here because 7 days felt manageable, and it is. 1 sentence, 3 readings each morning. A small daily practice that takes less time than the scrolling you do before you are fully awake. But what it asks of you is not small. It asks you to genuinely consider the possibility that the ceiling you have been pressing against is not made of circumstances. It is made of the inner posture from which you have been meeting your circumstances, and that posture can change. The proverb you now carry is not decoration. It is a tool. Use it with precision, with patience, and with the stubborn willingness to stay past the test. May the blessing you have been working toward find you before you expected it, and may the effort that brought you here be the last effort you make from fear. Go in peace. Shalom.